like rugby. I played for 3 different clubs: Newcastle Falcons, Stade Francais Paris, and Gloucester. And then I was very fortunate for the 11 of those 12 years that I was playing professionally. I was playing for England, and I was actually captain for England for 6 of those years. And in 2009, call it a sort of a fallow year, bit of dearth of talent or whatever else, but I got voted as the best player in the world in 2009. And then unfortunately I got injured at a World Cup in 2013, so went and took on a sort of series of challenges. And those sort of include, I went and sailed around the world. I'm currently the holder of 4 Guinness World Records. We've raised over 2.7 million for charity so far. And it's been challenges sailing around the world, going to the North Pole, summiting Mount Everest, cycling across America. So sort of a plethora of different things. Guillaume and I met each other doing our executive MBA at Cambridge, so that sort of was squeezed in there at some point along the way. And I've, for the last 5 years, been a director at PwC. So I lead our real estate and construction practice across UK and EMEA. And the other hat I have to wear is I am our lead partner on all of our interactions that we have with government in the UK, and a particular department within government called the Department of Culture, Media and Sport. So DCMS is my baby, if that makes sense. So that's me. There you go, Guillermo.
Perfect. I really appreciate it. And thank you so much, because I know you have a very tight agenda. So as I said at the beginning, this is going to be an hour conversation. But this is a very relevant topic despite the area in which we're operating today, because some people here are in the construction area, some people are entrepreneurs and so forth here in the audience. We've got people from Deloitte, also for a lot of consultancies. So I think it's important that we're able to grasp the reality that we are in today, because the uncertainty is part of nature, right? We're all the time living under ever-changing environments. But also this brings new opportunities. That is why we're here today, in order to see how we can take the best out of today's changing environment and how we can implement something practical into our lives. Because today this looks like a tidal wave, right? A lot of things are happening throughout the world. In every single country, there are strikes or problems. If you look at the news, it's like everything is wrong. But this is also accelerated with the new neighbor we got today with COVID. So it looks like under uncertainty, you cannot lead, you are stressed out. How you are able to start making best decisions with the information you got. I'm giving this presentation just as a context, because Ollie is going to be our experts, but so we can start with the same context altogether. So we all know, or we have a notion of what leadership is. Basically, put a vision and how to convince people and engage them properly, communicate. It has something to do with strategy, directions, and so forth. But we all have a notion of it. And I think this quote right here is a very interesting one from Martin Luther King, that it puts the context right on the core, on what we are looking for out of this conversation today. That he says that the ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort, like we were before maybe, but where he stands in times of changes, controversies, and so forth. So giving this quote, I would like to dive in directly to the questions that we received during the previous weeks. And we tried to put together the top 10. But as I said at the beginning, if you have more questions, please drop them in the chat box so I can read them out loud at the end. But these were kind of the ones that we were able to put together. And one of the first one is how to lead under uncertainty. So Ollie, maybe you have already some strategies, given your expertise in different fields in the corporate world, as a rugby player, as a volunteer in a lot of charities. So how can you illustrate us on how to lead under uncertainty? Do you have any strategies, any comments on that?
Yeah, I think it's important to stress, right, that uncertainty is there every single day, irrespective of what's going on. I mean, if everyone had the answers, life would be pretty boring, right? So we never quite know if the decision we're making is a good one or a bad one. We just try and mitigate against those risks by doing things such as research or using experience or other people's knowledge and know-how in order to sort of reduce the risk of maybe making a bad decision. So for me, it's about decision making, and ultimately how you surround your, how and who you surround yourself with in order to help sort of mitigate against those risks. Right now, obviously, uncertainty is at its all-time high, probably, just in terms of the the nature of the landscape. Nobody's ever faced before a global pandemic that has disrupted so many different industries, so many different businesses, so many different families. And what I found previously, if I give some sort of examples or whatever else, I mean, they pale into insignificance when you put them up against a COVID world or whatever else like that. But whenever we've had moments of, I'll give an example, was when we sailed around the world, there was a particular stretch of water that everybody had spoken around called the Southern Ocean. The Southern Ocean is between effectively South Africa and Australia, which is where we were sailing across. We were told that this stretch of water was ridiculously volatile, extremely rough and aggressive, and as a crew, as a boat, as a team, or whatever else, we had to make sure that we were 100% on our money and that we were working coherently and constructively as a team. And as always, in probably those situations, when you've come off the back of being pretty successful, or the team is fairly coherent. We'd been together for 3-4 months now. We'd gone from London to Rio to Cape Town. We were sitting first in the leaderboard overall, so everyone was fair, a little bit cocksure, a little bit overconfident potentially, but we were working well as a collective, and everybody was, if you like, moving in the same direction. On day 5 of what was a 28-day crossing, we got hit by an enormous rogue wave that basically rolled the entire boat. So you had people that were asleep underneath, thrown out of their decks, out of their bunks, all the food in the galley all over the place. People that were on deck were thrown into the water. 2 people thought, one thought they broke their shoulder, another one had knocked himself out on the winch handle. Now, what that uncertainty caused, right, was we still knew how to sail. Everybody still knew the process. Everybody still knew the structure. But what the change in dynamic had caused was ultimately what we're probably facing now, which is fear, right? Fear, which is a crippling emotion or feeling that goes through people, and it affects people in different ways, right? So we had on the boat probably what people are experiencing right now, a moment of fear that caused some people to be like, oh my God, this is the best experience ever. I want to roll the boat again. Let's do it again. Let's go for this. Let's really attack these volatile and uncertain environments. Contrasted with the other people that are like, oh my God, I wasn't expecting that. I didn't sign up for this. Let's turn the boat around, go home, get me off. I don't want anything to do with this anymore. So that change in dynamic over one event, if you like, caused massive amounts of uncertainty amongst the crew. How do we bring that back round? And we were faced with a situation where we were 180 miles off the lead at this point in time when this happened. We had 23 days left to sail. We won that race by 1 mile. 5,800 miles. We won that race by 1 mile. And the way that it was done, to be honest with you, the outcome in terms of winning or not winning is kind of irrelevant. It was actually the decision-making process of, do we turn around and go home? Do we basically batten down the hatches, take all the sails down and just try and ride out the storm? Or do we basically throw a little bit of cloth up and throw caution to the wind, have a go and trust in our process, trust in the team? None of those decisions would have been wrong, right? But we chose the latter. We chose let's throw the sail up and have a go. And the reason we did that was because we'd invested 4 or 5 months of time prior to that, understanding our process, which is great, and trusting in that process, but more importantly, probably trusting in each other. So we'd invested 4 to 5 months, sometimes some people longer, in understanding the people on the boat, what made them move, what motivated them, and then equally understood what was going on in their brains at that point in time to make sure that we didn't ultimately overstretch them or push them far too outside of their comfort zone. And what we gained was a really functional and operational team unit where everybody was, if you like, excelling within their own realms of comfort. And that is been consistently across the board. What I've noticed is that if people are scared or fearful of something, you need to find the areas of which they're comfortable with and then articulate the value of what they're doing in that role, in that job function, and how valuable it is to the team, and then motivate them to understand that they still have an important role and an important contribution to the outcome of the whole group.
Sounds amazing. Yeah, actually makes a lot of sense to me because you mentioned something that you spent a lot of time, or you invested a lot of time in the previous preparation. So you already knew their weaknesses, their strengths, and so forth. So you were able to craft a strategy before you faced this challenge. It was not like you faced the challenge and you didn't know the people in your team. So you already took some time in advance to prepare yourself and your team, your group, for these kind of challenges, this uncertainty that might happen. It didn't come out of the blue, right? So it was kind of a well thought preparation, just in
Yeah,
case.
yeah. I mean, yes, yeah, yes and no. Of course. I mean, it's that classic Mike Tyson analogy, right? You know, everything's great until you walk into the ring and get punched in the face, right? You can have the perfect preparation, then suddenly you get hit on the nose, like, oh, I wasn't quite expecting that. So I don't think you can ever really prepare for the uncertain. Like, you can never prepare for a huge rogue wave that's going to roll your boat, or a global pandemic that's going to turn over the entire globe, and every process that's in place. But what you can do is you can obviously have a process and a system that you sort of operate to, which is helpful. But more importantly, you can invest loads and loads of time into building a rapport and trust with people, so that ultimately when you say to them, look, I would like us to go left, I'd like us to go right, whatever it might be, they believe and trust in your decision, if you like. And that's ultimately the greatest attribute that a team can have, which is, if we're going to do something, we're going to do it all together. And whether it's the right or the wrong answer, we'll find out at the end, right? As long as you're willing to listen to everybody's contribution that has value and adds value to that conversation. If it ends up being the wrong one, well, it doesn't matter, right? You'll have, most of the time people say, the decision you make doesn't always have to be the right one, but just make sure you go through with the decision. All the uncertainty in the middle is the problem. So I've from experience, whether it's being able to make those decisions and then people trusting and backing in those decisions, because ultimately you're going to find out a hell of a lot quicker whether or not they've been successful, which comes down to that analogy of like failing fast and whatever else, that you're able to discover quickly what works, what doesn't work, and then move on to the next iteration.
Yeah, for sure. No, thank you for that, for that comment, because it all comes down, or boils down, to this decision-making process and how you cope with stress. So this is the second question that we also received, is how to make more efficient decisions when you don't have all the data, when you have maybe pieces of information that don't make sense, plus the stress you are dealing with. So how you cope with your internal emotions in order to make the best decisions with a short period of time, and try to make it right? Because you're all the time in the spotlight, and people are expecting you to execute right, and they maybe have in their mind they have the best solution, but maybe the outcome, it won't be as beautiful as planned. So do you have any advice on that, any experience or examples that you can share with the audience?
I mean, I think one of my biggest criticisms so far is that leaders, or the word leadership, right? Some people seem to, either the leaders believe this or the collective believe this, right? That they have to have all the answers, right? That is not the case, right? Nobody can have all the answers to problems and problem solve. Okay, that's the beauty of the team. That's the beauty of the world, right? If we had all the answers to every problem, then it would be a pretty boring place to live. I think the crucial part is experience is something, you mentioned, you touched on it. That is something obviously that helps influence and shape your own biases, your own decisions, etc., etc. And if you've been there, seen that, and done that before, then that's obviously going to help you navigate through those sort of murky waters. You've obviously mentioned data. Sometimes data can be totally misleading. Sometimes it can be helpful. What I found, again, it's that classic adage of you are what you eat, which is, I'm referring to, you are what you surround yourself with. So if you surround yourself with people that are more intelligent than you, more experienced than you, willing to challenge, etc., etc., then the likelihood is you're going to have the opportunity of making better decisions, because you're going to have better information, you're going to have better data, you're going to have more confident, competent people that can help you navigate through those times of change. And some of the biggest failings I've seen in some of the leaders that I've either worked with or been associated with, or even had the fortune of leading, has been that they felt they need to be top of the tree.
Mm.
You know, they need to be top of the tree, and they need to know everything about everyone. And actually, the reality is the best leaders I've ever worked with have been the ones that have been intrigued, inquisitive, wanting to know more, and surrounding themselves with people who ultimately know more than they do, because A, it furthers their own development, B, it actually improves the overall value of the collective and provides a much more sort of effective and cohesive group than somebody that sits as the sort of dictator at the top, that, you know, the all-seeing, all-knowing, you know, guru. That's a nonsense for me. That doesn't work in the long run. It might work for some short-term success, but overall long-term systemic change, systemic success, it doesn't work.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's also good to show yourself vulnerable, right? That you don't have all the answers. So this humble mindset, it also shows. You can tell your team that maybe you need their help. You need their advice also, because if you are the one making all the decisions without consulting anyone, of course that maybe the final port won't be the best solution and people won't feel engaged. So there is another point that people raise also. Everyone knows that the CEOs or the founders, depending if you are an entrepreneur, for instance, you are facing certain lonely time. So everyone says that it's lonely on top. So it's very hard to concentrate, to ask for advice. How do you lead this kind of situation? I'm pretty sure you have faced it when you were, for instance, the captain of the rugby team back then. There were certain times, I'm pretty sure, that you felt like alone. Okay, what do I do here? I don't have a path. I don't have a route to follow. Do I need a coach or something? How do you maintain the passion, the energy, and so forth while facing this kind of situation or dilemma?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the route to the top is always a hell of a lot easier than staying there. You know, that's a critical part, right? Because you've always got this pursuit of like number one. When you finally get there, it's like, okay, everyone else is now chomping at being at number one, and it's your job to try and stay there. You know, I think again, it comes down to, you know, the company that you keep, right? I did a research project, a thesis around boards and what are the most effective governance structures that exist within organizations and companies. And ironically, a lot of the chief execs that really struggled and, you know, were critical of their environment, they complained of being very, very lonely, right? And that was because, that, if you like, the company that they kept, the people that were around them, whether that be their fellow board or their non-exec board, the roles that they took were very much a sort of critical grilling of that chief exec's position, rather than a supportive function around the strategy and the overall outcomes and the vision of the chief exec and of the board as a whole. So I think in the crucial part of that, it comes down with how open and willing you are to listen, and how responsive you are to further development. You know, you've got to be fairly self-aware as an individual to be enthusiastic about learning, so have a bit of a sort of continual learning focus or attitude to things. And then it's around the people that you have within you, whether that's your board, your friends, your non-execs, you know, your teammates, whatever. No, don't get me wrong, right? England got to number one in the world. We were ranked number one side of the world. That was nothing to do with me, right? That was to do with the fact that as a collective, we had not even necessarily the best players on the field, right? But as a unit, we were the best unit on the field. And the reason that was like that was because we had an environment in which everybody could challenge, everybody felt empowered enough to give their opinion, everybody understood the process, everyone understood the tactics, if you like. And equally, we had a philosophy in our group that we were committed to excellence. Now, excellence is impossible, right? Perfection, the perfect performance is impossible. But it was always around, instead of having 100% in terms of like outcome, you know, performance, whatever, it was always about 100% of attitude. So every single time we recognized that, you know, you can't always play your best on the field or deliver your best every single day, but the way that you approach it, the way that you mentally and emotionally apply yourself is possible, right? So we demanded that every single day you're at 100% from attitude and application is what is critical. And I think, is it lonely at the top? How do you stay at the top? Surround yourself with great people and make sure that the culture you have within your team, your group, or whatever else is committed to, you know, 100% attitude and application. Don't worry about performance, because that'll look after itself for people like that.
Yeah, for sure. I appreciate it got something to do with this psychological safety too, that there's a lot of studies about that, but giving people the chance to express their ideas, and maybe without the fear of being ridiculed or whatever, so they also feel part of that coherent group instead of isolated pieces of a team or whatever. So it's a great advice, and I'm pretty sure in the corporate world we can also feel that situation too. Even though we are competing against one another in certain industries, in certain companies, it's good also to try and build that rapport with the team. This culture that is very hard in certain industries, especially if you are working via fees or so forth, to create this inflection point from a boss to a leader. This transition is kind of hard. Have you detected in your whole career an inflection point, and what triggered that jump, that change of level between just an employee, a boss, maybe you were promoted because of your skills, to then become a leader and people look up to you and are expecting you to deliver?
Well, I mean, you're 100% right in terms of, you know, the overall process. If I look at my organization where I am, you said Deloitte, we're on here too, right? But if I look at Pricewaterhouse where we are, you know, our whole business model, our whole employee life cycle, if you like, goes from being someone who's a deliverer, right? You spend whatever, I don't know, the first, whatever it might be, 12 to 20 years of your career on delivery, on the really nuts and bolts, the granular detail of, you know, dotting I's, crossing T's, and making sure that everything is on point when you deliver it to the client. Once they then make a partner, the role is very, very different. Your responsibility and expectancy is not to do any of the detail anymore. You are sort of the overseer of work, and you're then meant to go out and sell. All right, you're meant to go out and lead teams, sell the business, and whatever else like that. Those are two very, very different roles. Very, very different roles. And that is a huge, well, not only like, you know, physiological shift, but that's a massive psychological shift in terms of, okay, how I am the person that every year I'm trying to deliver my, whatever it might be, 500,000, 1 million, 2 million in terms of revenue. And I've got to make sure that I, you know, if I sell wallets, I'm going to go every day and make sure that I sell all these wallets. Suddenly I've got to stop selling wallets, and I've got to go actually help all the team make them, build up a marketing strategy, go out, like a very, very different role and responsibility. And I think that transition is tough, really, really tough for people. And my personal, you know, I was an expert at rugby. I was an expert in my particular area of my field of being a winger. I then retired through injury and then came to work for PwC, where I was expected to be a generalist, and B, a generalist on things that I had no idea about, right? Tax, VAT, compliance, risk. I was like, look, you know, the only risk that I ever had was like, do I get my head kicked in on a Saturday or not, you know, from some big gnarly second row? So, you know, how do I apply this into my new environment? I found that transition very, very, very tough, really tough, right? But the critical part, I think, that I learned, and I'm still learning along the way, is that no question is a dumb question. And it depends on the environment that you've got and the company that you keep, if you like, that how easy it is for you to ask those questions and how comfortable you feel asking those questions. Because if it's a great environment, one of open, honesty, transparency, then it's going to be a great experience, because you can feel confident in asking these questions to further your knowledge, further your development. If there's a real pressure for you to know everything from the outset, then it becomes almost like a claustrophobic environment, because you feel like you don't know everything, but you don't feel like you can ask anything. So I would say that transition is aided by all the people around you. So if there are people here who are leaders or who are being led, I would ask you, how much time do you actually invest into making sure that the people within your group or the people that you work with feel comfortable to come forward and ask you questions? We used to have a saying within England of getting comfortable at being uncomfortable. So how often do you let people step out into that uncomfortable zone and be comfortable in asking those questions or not knowing the answers, or, you know, admitting fault, if you like, and ultimately to develop and further their own understanding, but equally to develop and further the collective understanding of the group.
For sure. We do have a lot of people here in the audience that are facing today this challenge to transition from the corporate world maybe to the entrepreneurial world, or vice versa. So in your case, drawn from your experience, what were the kind of decisions or the process that you went through in order to make this decision and say, okay, I'm not a professional rugby player anymore, and now I'm going to be a corporate person? So I'm pretty sure that in between, in order to make that decision, which I'm pretty sure was very tough, you analyzed the situation with the pros and cons, and you came up with a sort of process to analyze that. So if I'm, for instance, a corporate person today and I'm enchanted with this idea of becoming an entrepreneur, how do I make up my mind? Is there like a funnel? If I go to the marketing area, do I do a funnel? Okay, these are the major risks, and then I try to see if it's good for me, it's a good fit now, given the current circumstances. What would you say to them?
So is your question, right, how do I analyze the risk around decisions?
Before making that decision, that transition decision.
Well, I mean, it's like all these things, right? You can never truly know, okay? You're never going to know until you take the leap as to whether or not something is for you, whether you're going to excel at it or not excel at it. But you can, again, mitigate that risk by, as you say, doing the research and asking the questions that you need. And it depends on how inquisitive you are as an individual. If you're somebody like me, for example, I act a lot on my gut. So I like to know the high level information around what something entails and what might be required of me. And then I do a bit of an assessment as like, okay, have I got the competency? Where would that challenge me? What are my strengths, what are my weaknesses in this environment? Where could I excel, and where would I need support? But I act on my gut then. I'm like, okay, this feels right. This feels like the right thing to do. Other people need more than that, right? They need more analysis, more data, more conversation. There's nothing wrong with that, okay? But it's ultimately, I can't answer that question because it's on an individual basis, right? What works for Guillermo or somebody else that's on this call are going to be very, very different. And I think the failing of a leader or a member of a team that is responsible for people, I was always brought up, everyone probably has heard this, right? My parents used to teach me, or my dad used to teach me, like, treat others how you'd like to be treated yourself, right? Well, that for me now, I think is totally wrong. I'm like, Dad, you taught me the wrong message all throughout all my life, right? Because if I treat people how I want to be treated, that doesn't mean it's going to work for them. It means it's going to work for me, right? So it's more about treat people how they want to be treated, okay? And the only way you can do that, the only way you can find that out is by investing time into each individual to understand what motivates them, what makes them move, why they turn up to work every day, why they are in your team, and then feeding that and delivering that, right? Your job as a leader is to make sure that the people in your team get out of their job, their experience, and working in your environment exactly what they want. And if you do that and you deliver that, I can tell you now, the one thing you will get, forget like performance because that'll look after itself, you will get trust and belief and faith in you, and like undying support, so that when you need them, maybe like during COVID or whatever, I need you to rally to the cause, they will respond.
For sure. No, and great advice too, because that's true. I mean, if you feel that confidence that your leader is going to be behind you, supporting you, and you are not fearing the consequences, the potential consequences, of course, you're willing to give more, the 100% that you're willing to do. Here we got another question that we also received about when you are newly assigned to a role, you have a lot of uncertainty. Again, you're facing this every single time, right? So these 90-day plans are very well used throughout the corporate world. The entrepreneurs also use the 90-day plans in order to get in 3 months the best results possible with specific KPIs, right? So is it a good path to do this 90 days plan, or there is another way that maybe you are implementing now in Price Waterhouse, or maybe throughout your life? How you face this newly assigned role? You have not a clue. When you say, for instance, when you shifted from the rugby player to the corporate world, you had a lot of doubts about what the task was about. So I'm pretty sure that you came up with a plan with the specific deadlines and so forth. Is there like a better way to do this, or the 90-day plan, as I don't know, back from the 90s, is the way today?
Yeah, I mean, in answer to your first question, like when I retired, I had a really clear plan from a rugby context, but I had no plan from a career perspective, right? So from a rugby perspective, I was going to play at a World Cup, I was going to go to a Commonwealth Games in Glasgow, and then I was going to have 2 years at going to the Rio 2016 Olympics, right? That was my plan. That within, whatever, 5 minutes got torn up completely, right? And suddenly I was no longer a rugby player. I had a career-ending injury, and that dream, that plan went totally out the window. Did I have a plan B? No, not at all. I didn't know what I was going to do, to be honest with you. But if you like, my plan B had been something that I didn't realize, but I'd invested it heavily in over probably the 12 years of me playing, which was my network. So every time I played for England, every time I played for my club, I'd make sure that I stayed around. I talked to the fans. I went and saw the sponsors. I was the archetypal good professional on and off the field. And that paid dividends for me in the end, right? Because now when I retired, I was immediately offered the opportunity to go and sail around the world as part of this Clip Around the World race as a ambassador for 10 Downing Street. So, as part of the British government, a legacy program to encourage foreign direct investment into the UK. So I was encouraged to be like a spokesperson for that. That had come through my network, the people that I knew. So suddenly this 12 years of investment in my plan B, which was, I guess a backup solution, suddenly was bearing fruition. My network was starting to exercise itself and help. I went on the Clip Around the World race. I met a senior partner from PwC. He said, I've never met anyone that leads a team the way you lead a team. You have to come work with us. That's how I got my job at PwC, right? Sailing around the world. So not the most conventional of job interviews. But it kind of worked. And as I've moved through the rest of my life now post rugby, that network has been absolutely critical for me in terms of helping me advance in my next career within PwC, because although sponsors that I'd spent that time with after England games and seeing them, suddenly they were now, if you like, client targets or potential clients at PwC that I could now go and talk to. I had a good rapport and relationship with them. They trusted me, and suddenly we could start to build a collective and prosperous future career where I'm helping them, and et cetera, et cetera. So it's, of course, if you've got a clear direction and a plan as to where you want to get to, that's going to help you, right? And as long as you're open and willing to change along that route, because it doesn't always go according to plan, then brilliant. But in contrast, could I sit here and say to you, I wrote my 90-day plan when I got injured and I had a really clear trajectory of where I wanted to be and what I wanted to do? Did I? Heck, I didn't have a clue what I wanted to do, right? I wanted to approach my life with, if you like, optimism rather than pessimism. I wanted to be glass half full rather than half empty. So how do I make sure this is a shit situation that I'm in here? I thought I was going to go to Olympic Games. That's not happened. I could sit here and mope and get down in the dumps and get depressed about it all, or I can just try and launch into the next thing, whatever that is, but approach it with energy, enthusiasm, and see whether I like it or not. And if I do, brilliant. If I don't, I can always move and pivot onto the next thing. So I would say, be a glass half full person, approach things with energy and enthusiasm. If you've got a plan, good on you. If you haven't, don't stress too much about it, but don't sit there and mope around the fact that you don't have any solutions, you don't have a plan. Be the glass half full and move forward with some energy and optimism. And I think that's going to be pretty critical right now with what's coming and what's happened because of COVID. You're going to get tons of setbacks all the time, probably more than you anticipated, hopefully less than you anticipate. But the critical part is to constantly keep going forward with energy and enthusiasm, because it will come right for you just when you don't think it will.
For sure. I don't remember who said this, but life is what happened while you're planning, right? So, of course, what you mentioned is the plan B or plan C or whatever might not happen. So you have to have this flexibility. in order to adapt to the circumstances. And great that you mentioned the power of the network, because if you are an isolated player, the only one doing something, and you don't relate with people, of course that you are closing new opportunities to happen in your favor. So that's an amazing advice too, because some people tend, especially under stress, to isolate and make decisions by themselves without consulting people, without engaging, which is the major challenge of a leader. So question number 6 that we received is about the different characters. We know that, for instance, if we are under a war situation, maybe you need to be more authoritarian, right? To impose things without engaging. If you want to be inspirational, you can you have this transformational approach. So despite the character, what would you say is like the proper type or the proper way to lead when you are facing complex scenarios? Because it depends on the character of the person. You can be shy, but you can still lead. You can be extroverted. But is there a way that you have seen that works best on the different scenarios?
No, I mean, the honest answer is no. Yeah, the critical part of that is you've got to be authentic and be yourself the whole way through it. Also, if you don't have any authenticity or you're not genuine in terms of your approach, whatever style of leader you are, people are going to rumble you. And secondly, if you are if you are a transformational leader, as you mentioned, but you're trying to be authoritarian, it's not going to work, right? People are going to see through it straight away because you're not going to be very good at it because it's not natural to you. So the critical part is more understanding your own competency, your own capabilities, your own style of how you like to do things, and then recognizing when that's relevant and when that's not relevant, right? So what are your strengths and when does that play, that style of leadership, when does that work? And actually, when does it act more of a, negative? When does it sort of, make things worse? And then make sure you surround yourself with people that are very good at that. So in a certain scenario, if you're very good at being authoritarian, brilliant, this is your time to shine. Okay, right now we need a different management, we need a different approach to the group here that needs to be more cohesive or collaborative or transformational, whatever you want to call it. Okay, well, I've got Guillermo, who's my sort of right-hand man, or I've got Tracy, who's my left-hand woman, who's really, really good at that sort of methodology, and you bounce off each other, right? That's the importance of a great team and good leadership and good management. Is at the end of the day, you're all trying to get to the end goal. You're all trying to get to this holy grail of operational efficiency, operational excellence, whatever it is, success, whatever you're deeming that as. The critical part is you can't do that on your own, right? You just cannot deliver that physically on your own. If I said to you right now, Guillermo, in order to be the best sportsman in the world, you need to be the best footballer, the best rugby player, the best tennis player, the best cricket player, you'd be like, well, I can't be all of them, right? But if you want the best team, you're going to need to get the best people in those roles and those functions. And that's the same thing here. It's the same thing, right? And there are leaders that are very, very good at sort of transitioning between 2 or 3 styles of leadership. Any more than that, it's not possible, okay? And that's why you get good captains, vice captains, senior team members or whatever that can step in and fill the void when they need to. And your responsibility as the, whatever you call it, head honcho, is to understand and have that self-awareness to know where you need to fill the gaps.
For sure. Yeah, so it's important to map out your personality, where you feel comfortable at, and already you're good at, you can deliver, and then find complementary skills, of course, to step in whenever the circumstances need it. So it makes perfect sense. Again, we're reinforcing this need to work as a team player all the time, even though it's redundant, because everyone knows that is quite unique. But today we're facing these distance meetings, people with different time zones. So it is even more complicated today to create this rapport when you don't know your new team, right? Some people are designated to a role, but they haven't met their, 10 people that are underneath him or her. So it's even more complicated to work and engage people at a distance and gain their validation. So I'm pretty sure you have seen this too, and a lot of people in the call are working in different companies. The team who is connected here in Deloitte, I'm pretty sure they can relate to this problem today, that when the world is flat, different cultures, different time zones, maybe you're working at night, England is 5 hours ahead of Chile, for instance. So it's even more hard, right? So how to do this in the best way possible?
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. Of course, face-to-face interaction. There's nothing that can beat or make or be a substitute for looking someone in the whites of their eyes and understanding who they are and what they're about, and what makes them move. Okay, but equally, Zoom or whatever it might be, digital platforms have allowed, for example, in order for me to come to Chile to see Guillermo, costs a lot of money. So actually, the frequency that I will make contact with Guillermo physically would probably be limited to once or twice a year. Okay, is that enough time for me to build a successful rapport and a great relationship with you? Maybe, maybe not, right? Of course, over a few beers or whatever, where we let all our guards down and whatever else, we'll talk open and honesty. We can understand about each other. But the beauty about these sort of digital platforms now is that actually I can speak to you every day if I need to, right? I can speak to you every day. You can see what back of my room looks like, what's hanging on my wardrobe, what clothes I look like. You can see my kids running in and causing chaos and whatever else like that. So you get to understand who I am about, from a more human side of things. And I think that's the advantage of these platforms, and that's the opportunity in this moment, if you like, is that you've got the time now to invest and understand who these people are that you work with every single day, what makes them move, why they turn up every day to work, and actually understand their motivators, and who they are as people. And whilst it's not going to be as good or as authentic or as, if you like, as progressive as doing it there and then, looking into their eyes, it's a damn sight better than once or twice a year. So you take the rough with the smooths. You'll win some and you'll lose some, but I found overall actually that it's humanized the experience, if you like. I've got to know more about the people that I work with, the lives that they lead, the families that they're part of, through these mediums than through turning up every single day at the work in work, where it's maybe a little bit more formal, a little bit more corporate, and this is more human. And ultimately, at the end of the day, we're all human beings, and we all like to know each other and have close relationships.
For sure. So the one-on-one sessions is still a must. Maybe now it's accelerated. We have the chance even to get more kind of these conversations on a frequent basis. I still, on my personal note, I think that this is quite hard to gain this normal relationship happening, especially if you're working at late at night in your time zone with someone who's waking up in the other side of the world. It's still the challenge, but looking at the bright side, we have the opportunity to do it. Before, maybe it was through phone call. You couldn't see their expression in the face when you were transmitting something properly. So this can translate into these multicultural teams that we're all involved in some way or another. Even if your company now is very small and you are based in a particular country, in a particular segment, you're still facing this disruption of multicultural teams. So is it important here to create this common purpose, especially if you have multiple interests? You mentioned before that it's important to get to know the people at a personal level, right? To get to know what moves them, what's their driver, but how you are able to create this purpose so everyone is moving towards a particular direction that is good for the whole team, when maybe the interests of the team that you were inherited are different and multiple. How you're able to move everyone into the same direction?
Well, I mean, that's ultimately your challenge as a leader, right? As a manager or a leader of your team, and that is whatever that common purpose is. Normally, and hopefully, you've collectively come to agreement around a sort of common purpose statement for an organization. Like, what do we stand for? What's authentic and genuine about us as a group of people that are speaking into the market every single day? What do we want to be? Who do we want to, what do we want to represent? That's ultimately what your purpose is all about, right? So hopefully you've done that collectively anyway. But if you haven't, well, either way, if you have or you haven't, your role as a leader is to make sure that whatever those reasons are, all that time that you've invested into understanding why Guillermo turns up to work every single day, why Rohit turns up every single day and is part of your team, your role is to link their values, their drivers to that purpose, that common purpose, right? So how you Guillermo, working towards this common purpose is ultimately going to allow you to achieve your personal ambitions, aspirations, and dreams. That's the critical part for you as a leader, right? And if you can get that buy-in and belief in the message and ultimately the end goal, and understanding that actually by me working towards this, we all win. It's a win-win situation for all. Then you're properly winning as a group, as a culture, as a team, as an organization.
Yeah, no, for sure. I completely agree with that. When we stated this slide at the beginning, we said that the importance of direction and communication in that small graph, that it makes perfect sense. So now we are in the last two questions before we open the floor to the final Q&A session. But here there's an important question, I think, about coping with stress. When you are trapped in the problem, maybe you don't see the forest, you are just seeing one tree, right? You are hitting yourself against the same wall. You cannot see any solution, any way out. Do you have any advice, any process that you run personally when you detect that you are stressed out, but you cannot see any solution? So how you see the whole forest and the whole opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, what you're talking about is obviously the classic adage, when the proverbial hits the fan, most people become very singular, very focused on the problem, solving the problem, and they get into the granular detail rather than looking at the collective and trying to keep an objective view, right? The reality is the whole reason why you're there in the first place as the leader, or at the top of your, top of the tree in terms of that position, is you're meant to keep that objective view, right? You're meant to keep that, whatever you want to call, 360-degree perspective on what's going on across your whole organization all the time, across your team the whole time. And then your ability as a leader to then remain objective and trust in the people around you to deliver the solutions, right? I don't know, whoever it might be, the person that you've appointed as the expert and the leader of a certain division or compartment of your team or group or function or business function is under pressure, is under stress. Your role as a leader is not to do their job for them, because ultimately they're not going to learn, they're not going to evolve as an individual. So it's not to step in and fill the void, it's to encourage them and provide the structure and, if you like, the clear guidelines to achieving success. Now, if at the end of all that process, they're actually not the right person, right? They can't actually deliver. They're not competent enough to deliver against that criteria. Then you've learned something as well yourself, which is invaluable, right? Because you need to replace that individual. But if you step in, you do all the work, and at the end of it, it's all a rip-roaring success, then all you've learned is that you can do the job, but actually you don't have enough time to do the job. So you still don't understand whether that person has the competency and the capability of delivering. And equally, you've understood that actually in the times of stress, you need to keep diving into that, which is actually a distraction from your other roles within the business. So whilst it's total common sense, it's definitely not common practice. And the critical part is to try and remain objective during times of stress. And the really successful leaders and the successful organizations, teams, for example, during COVID, are going to be those that have managed to maintain that objective view, trust in their individuals, because they'll have learned across the board where they're strong, where they're weak, where they need to make improvements. But equally, they've probably advanced, evolved, educated, and furthered the learning for the people that they've got managing and running the various different areas of their team's business organization.
And it's part of the leader's role to manage stress. I mean, everything is a problem, but it's up to you if you see it as a problem or as a growth experience, as we can also call it. So the final question we got before we dive into the chat box, please, if you have any questions, drop them there so I can read them out loud. The final is about dealing with your own emotions, avoiding this burnout situation when you cannot deliver anymore. You gave 100%, you are exhausted, plus dealing with other people's emotions. And you in addition, you need to handle yourself. So I'm pretty sure in the sports world, this burnout process is very common. If we extrapolate that into the entrepreneurial side or the corporate world, have you seen it too? Have you a special strategy to deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, being honest and being frank, I think if you If you're at that point of burnout and emotional fatigue, and you're taking on so much, you've probably not been doing your job correctly as a leader, as a manager of an organization or a team or whatever else like that. Because your function, as we mentioned in the last one, is to act as the conductor. Right, is to act as the conductor, bringing people in to sing their various different notes or play their various different instruments at the right time when it's needed. If you are the conductor that at the same time is rushing from the pedestal to go and play the cello, equally coming back, rushing to go play the trumpet all at the same time, it's going to be a pretty horrible sound that gets produced at the end of it all, right? So the critical part is, again, building that competency across your organization and understanding your role in that all. And sometimes it's really difficult, okay? It's really, really difficult not to tinker with things and to step in and be like, well, no, you don't do it like this, you do it like that, right? Because it's just natural and you know how you do it. And equally, you've been groomed all your life to be a deliverer. You're used to stepping in and dotting the I's and crossing the T's. So it's really easy for you to do that. So it's kind of counterintuitive for you to step back and leave the problem and let somebody else solve it. But the value you're going to gain out of that, the experience the other people are going to gain from that, is going to build a much better collective, a much better group at the end of it all. And managing your emotions during that whole process, as I say, you should be feeling calm, confident, and in control of the process and how you're managing across the process. If you're getting stressed, it's probably because you're having to delve in, or you're allowing yourself to delve in and tinker with all the various different work streams of which you've originally appointed somebody else to be doing it anyway in the first place. Now that's obviously at scale. Now, whether your team is 2 people or 2,000 people, it's still the kind of same process. It's still the kind of the same thing. If somebody within your group, and if you're a 2, you're still a team, right? If that second person with your team has a role and responsibility and a function, if you're constantly stepping in and doing their job for them, they're not going to learn, right? And equally, they're not going to evolve. Your business isn't going to evolve, and eventually you're going to need to replace them because they don't know how to do the job because you've just done it for them the whole way through. So whether it's 2 or 2,000, the rule is still the same thing, right? Trust in those people around you, let them do their jobs, and you focus on being you and delivering what your function is, which is to be the manager, to be the conductor.
So micromanagement is not an option then. You need to empower the people to do what they were hired for, to do the proper work.
Only if it's, that micromanagement is tiny little incremental pieces that is helping evolve and educate somebody to go and do the job, and it adds value to your organization. If you're constantly coming in and having to do it all for the individual, nobody's benefiting from that scenario.
For sure. We have one question in the chat box. Please, if anyone has questions, or you can open up your mic and ask it directly, because this is the most valuable portion, because I'm pretty sure that after this whole conversation, a lot of questions might pop up in your mind related to your specific situation today. Let's take advantage of having Ollie here today. He can help us out to maybe have a different perspective. So Antares wrote here, what's the highest price you paid personally to achieve the position you are in today? Maybe you said on a family side, you don't have more time to do anything else that you were doing before. Can you think of the trade-off that you faced to achieve this current status?
Well, I mean, obviously, as people, right, the biggest price we all pay is time, right? Because it's the only thing we can't get any more of. So I think you want to be looking at your time as your greatest commodity, and ultimately what you invest that into needs to be, if you like, to your point, Guillermo, working towards your overall plan or strategy at the end of it all, right? So is this hour or 5 hours or 5 weeks or whatever it might be that I'm investing in, I'm taking it away, I've got a decision-making process. Do I spend these 5 hours with my wife and kids, or husband and kids, or whatever it might be, partner, or just sitting reading a book? Like, if I'm not doing that and I'm investing it into this, is this really benefiting me and taking me towards my desired outcome at the end of it, or whatever that might be? If the answer is no, then don't do it, right? I would say that's probably the biggest thing I've learned over my life so far, has been actually where am I allocating my time, and what's the if you like, the benefit or the upside that I'm getting from that investment. Now, I'm not saying that everything has to sort of be a payback and be a pay down, right? But I think you need to have some real clarity around things, all the superficial things that we think are really important, like, money, watches, I don't know, whatever else. They're actually totally irrelevant because you can always get more of them. The critical part is actually, okay, where, as Simon Sinek says, start with a why. Like, what's my reason for being? What do I ultimately want to see myself doing in 5, 10, 15 years from now? What do I want to be sort of famous for? What do I want to be known for? And what do I want what are my values and my principles all centered around? And if actually what you're doing on a daily basis and where you're investing your time, it's not enriching your life and taking you further towards that, then I would say stop doing it and figure out what it is that you really, really want. Because as I say to everybody, you're here for a good time, not for a long time. So make sure that you're using it wisely.
Yeah, for sure. Again, going back to the gut feeling, it gotta make sense to you personally to wait that the price you're gonna pay anyways. I mean, if you want to be the CEO in your company or want to be a founder, the stress management or the time you're going to allocate to that plan, of course, is going to change depending on that gut feeling you're facing. Here we got another question. Was it too different or too difficult, the challenge of being a sports leader to a corporate leader now, regarding people, decision-making processes, and so forth? If you live in the two worlds, can you tell the difference, the pros and cons, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, I'm being totally honest, I found the transition really, really tough, right? Because when I was playing rugby, I'd done it all my life. I'd been a professional for 12 years, but I started playing when I was 4, so I knew the game inside and out, right? I knew my job, I knew my role, my function. I knew what was good, what was bad from my perspective, and equally, I could tell what was good and bad with other people's jobs. I couldn't do their jobs, right? But I knew roughly what good and bad looked like. So I stepped out from an environment where I was very confident, very competent. I was probably in the top 1 percentile in the world in terms of who could do my job, and I could do some really specific things. You could ask me to like hit a target 20 yards away 15 times over and I could do it. All of those sort of core skills were irrelevant when I went into, PwC or the corporate world, right? How big a tackle I could make on somebody at the photocopier machine, or how many times I could run up and down the flight of stairs at PricewaterhouseCoopers was not very valuable, right? How low my heart rate was walking around the canteen was of no value to anyone really at PwC. So I suddenly had to sort of, if you like, reimagine and reskill myself and use, if you like, some of the human skills that I'd learned playing and managing and being involved in teams, in sporting teams, and translate them over into the corporate environment. I think what I found the hardest from my own personal perspective, Christian, was around, I guess, being comfortable at no longer being a specialist but being a generalist now. That was a really hard transition for me. I was used to being, give me the ball, I'll do something, and I can let me execute and be a deliverer. To suddenly I'm not expected to deliver anything anymore of like intricate detail, but my delivery was all around making sure that everybody was comfortable, everybody was happy, everyone knew their role, everyone was delivering on their expected workload, but not doing any of it myself. So it was, if you like, practicing some of the stuff that I've preached already to you guys around being 360 and constantly making sure that everybody is okay in delivering and being the conductor, whereas I used to be part of the band, and I found that hard at the beginning. Sure. and it took a bit of time for me to get used to that.
Great that you mentioned this transition from a specialist to a generalist, because the higher you climb up in the corporate ladder, of course you need to have broader skills, just instead of just specific ones that are specific to a specific role. So now you need to have the whole context in order to make the best decisions possible. So it makes perfect sense to me. Here we got, I'm reading them out loud as I get it, but if you want to open up the mics, that'd be amazing. Here we got oh, perfect. So does anyone have any more questions? Because we are on time. I said to Ollie that it's going to be an hour conversation. I don't want to steal more time from him. Okay, here we got, could you comment further between how you balance work with personal life and your personal goals in the long term?
Yeah, I mean, Roberto, it's a cracking question, and I've not always got the balance right, okay? But I would say that it comes back to that original point I mentioned around time. I've got a lot more sort of cognizant of my time and where I invest my time, and whether or not it's if you like, bringing any value back to what I'm trying to do, because I've got 2 young kids, I've got a wife that I would love to spend more and more time with. So if I'm going to do something, I really want to make sure that it's actually enriching my life, is true to me and my values. So I'm quite careful about that, but I also talk, I also make sure that I manage things within my work. Okay, so PwC don't want me just swanning off going up Mount Everest every year and things like that. So there needs to be value for them as a business, as to where I invest my time. If I'm saying to them, look, I'm not going to give you 6 weeks of my time this year because I'm going to go up Everest, they're going to be saying, well, okay, well, when are you going to give it back to us, and what value are we going to get out from you doing that, right? So I've got much better at really understanding what's of value to me, and then articulating how it can be beneficial to everyone else around me, and then being crafty and creative with how I manage my holidays and time and whatever else like that, so that I'm maximizing it maximizing everything all the time. So so that's an area that I've definitely got a lot better at, and I keep working on.
Great. We can all relate to that, especially the ones who are parents. It's very hard to keep the balance, all the balls in the air without dropping any of them. So thank you so much for that. We are about on time. Give me a sec here. Perfect. Thank you, Roberto, for that question. So if there are no more questions, I would like to thank you on behalf of the whole team here connected today. It was a very interesting topic because people requested it. We're all facing disruption in our own industries. So having a personal point of view on how you are coping with this is amazing. And it's great to have your insight, your expertise shared with the audience. So I really appreciate it. I thank you on behalf of the Cambridge Business Association. Of course, we're going to keep in touch again. We're going to have another session quite soon by the end of September about digital marketing and more to come on venture capital. So we're going to inform them to the community via LinkedIn. So thank you so much, Ollie. A big hug at a distance, and we'll keep on in touch for sure.
Cheers, buddy. See you soon. Thanks, everyone. Obviously get in touch on LinkedIn or whatever else if people want to as well. That's obviously an open invite.
Great. Really appreciate it. Thank you to everyone here connected today. Bye.